there, my name is Zach Shalat. I'm a realtor with Real Estate One. The purpose of today's discussion is to bring clarity to the proposed changes NAR recently agreed to. 2 weeks ago, on March 15th, the National Association of Realtors, NAR, and plaintiffs reached a proposed settlement agreement that would end litigation of claims related to brokers' commissions. The announcement of the proposed settlement agreement has led to a lot of misinformation reported in the media. Even President Joe Biden has misrepresented the proposed settlement agreement in a recent speech when he said, quote, NAR agreed for the first time Americans can negotiate lower commissions when they buy or sell their home, end quote. That statement is incorrect. Commissions have always been negotiable. Needless to say, there's a lot of confusion about what this proposed settlement means for real estate transactions moving forward. That is why today I'm here with Andrea Fitzgerald from Resolute Realty, Dave Abdallah from Century 21, and Micah Youb, REMAX Team 2000. All three panelists are leaders in today's real estate industry with over 60 years of combined experience in a list of awards and accolades that are only given to the best realtors in the country. They are all amongst the most qualified people in the world to bring clarity and explain what the proposed settlement means for my fellow realtors in attendance, as well as home buyers and sellers moving forward. With that, let the questions begin. David, you're up first.
Okay.
Are you able to provide in layman's terms the overview of the NAR settlement? Please also discuss the timeline of the settlement, the related verdict, and the implementation of the proposed changes.
Okay. So this started a couple years back, but a lot of us, at least I can speak for myself as a realtor, a lot of us were not familiar or aware of this going on. And suddenly, out of nowhere, for myself, watching the news, and we started getting different emails from our brokers and what have you about the settlement that happened, I think roughly about 2, 3, 4 weeks ago or something like that. Since then, there's been a lot of panic in the community, most specifically a lot of residents or home sellers and home buyers that are starting to panic over this, and some are feeling that they have a huge advantage with this, but with a lot of false information being given by the media and on social media, and unfortunately sometimes even some realtors are giving out some wrong information just because of a lack of knowledge sometimes. How's it going to impact? I think it's going to impact the industry, but not in as much of a drastic way as a lot of the media has shown that it's going to be. And like I mentioned, a lot of the stuff that's being shown on the media is almost completely false, right? Recently.
All right. Andrea, you're up next. When did the litigation begin, and were realtors and brokerages informed of the developments leading up to the settlement?
So as Dave said, I know there's been a few litigations around the same topic over the last couple of years that we've had just very brief knowledge around. As far as updates with the settlement, no, we found out when everyone else did on social media. But I do think NAR has done a good job staying ahead of everything for brokerages as well as realtors, putting out information, answering all questions regarding it.
Mm-hmm. So summary, basically multiple class action lawsuits have been going on for a while, but
right.
This really came to a head recently, about 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Right? Okay, Mike, over to you. With the settlement agreement still pending court approval, what are the potential challenges, obstacles that could arise during the implementation phase, and how can these be addressed proactively by real estate professionals?
I think us being here today is one of the reasons, or there's a lot of confusion right now, right? And you were talking earlier, and I says you were saying that Real Estate One was doing such a great job with training and all that, and there is a lot of confusion. So I think that it's a fluid situation. We're going to have more hoops that we need to go through, right? There's going to be a lot more paperwork that we need to do, and all that good stuff that your brokers and your associations will pass on down to you. But I suggest that we listen, right? We listen. We attend these meetings. We listen. I Googled NAR settlement, right? And there was 2 million articles that went on YouTube, and every agent in America has given their and some have good points, and some don't know what they're talking about. I think we need to be careful. But I think the challenges really are to come into from the legal side. At the end of the day, that's what we care about. I think we're all veterans here. We've all been selling for a long time, and I think we can do a good job selling whatever it is we need to sell. But as long as we stay within within the law, within what we can or can't do. It's spelling it out in black and white of what we can and can't do, and conveying that message from brokers to agents, from NAR and MAR to the brokers. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Let's see, David, back to you. How do you anticipate the removal of offers of compensation on the MLS will affect negotiation process between sellers and listing agents?
So I think initially it's going to be a drastic change for a lot of realtors, a lot of home sellers, and a lot of home buyers on the initial stages. But what a lot of people don't recognize is this is the exact template. There's an exact template that's been out there for over 100, 200 years, and that's the commercial real estate market. In the commercial real estate market right now, it is exactly like what they're proposing right now is exactly the commercial real estate market. So if I am going to go as a Century 21 agent, I'm going to go show a building that's for sale, or a business that's for sale, or even commercial vacant land that's for sale. There is nothing that's available for me as a realtor that would let me know how much commission is going to be paid to the selling broker on that particular property. In addition to that, in commercial real estate, they don't even have to co-op with another broker. In addition to that, they didn't have to put it on the MLS for that matter. So the process that is followed right now by all us realtors when we are selling a commercial property, we have to contact the agent and say, are you co-oping on this particular property? If they are, at that point, the next question is, how much are you co-oping at? In other words, are you co-oping at the traditional 3%, or most of them tend to be 3%, or are you doing it at 2%, or whatever it is? And then at that particular point, us as agents have to determine if we're going to be working in order to be able to get paid our fair share through the seller in this case, or are we going to get some of it from the buyer? So that template has been out there for 100 some years, and it's worked just fine. So I think there's just a lot of panic over this thing that maybe me being older, I don't know, anything that comes up, I just don't panic because I've been around long enough, with the dinosaurs since, as I was talking to you earlier, when computers were not even around. And I remember when computers first came out and the internet first came out, everybody was in a panic and as realtors. And I remember on the news and in the media, it said, oh, this is going to eliminate realtors. You're not going to need a realtor anymore because now you can go online, order a house and get the right home and buy it and do all the paperwork online. You don't even need realtors anymore. And as you've seen, realtors are still around. So I think there'll be an initial adjustment, but I think we'll go back to normal pretty quickly.
To follow up on that, these are just rumors and speculations. We're all familiar with showing time.
Correct.
There's a rumor that they'll just be advertising showing time for all the agents to see. What's your opinion on that?
So, and I think it could happen. So there's been like a joke that's kind of gone around amongst realtors where like in the remarks section of the multiple listing service, people will use different letters inside all the total 3, 4, 5 sentences where it'll show 3%.
Yeah.
Like this is a perfect home, but then they use the PER, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is there's going to be an adjustment because you have to think of it like this. As realtors, this is what we do for a living. So obviously, needless to say, yes, absolutely, we represent our buyers and our sellers, and we have a fiduciary duty to them to do the absolute most that we can for our clients. In the same token, there's the other variable, which is this is what we also do for a living. So the reality is, unlike what the media says, that now you can list your $400,000 home and you don't have to pay a commission. Well, if you're not going to be paying a commission, I don't know if many realtors are going to work for free. The reality is they're still going to be paid, and there's going to be an adjustment period to where maybe some of it may come from the buyer, some of it from the seller, or maybe the seller can pay the concessions on behalf of the purchaser. In other words, the closing costs. They pay the closing costs on behalf of the purchaser. Thus, the purchaser will have the opportunity to be able to pay the potential commission. And let's just use a hypothetical $3,000 in closing costs, $3,000 commission. For a buyer buying a home, a $100,000 home hypothetically, if they would have had to have come up with $3,000 for their closing costs, and now they don't, because that's being paid by the seller, but yet they pay you as an agent the $3,000, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. It's the same thing.
Right.
So I think it'll all work out in the end. I'm very confident of that, honestly.
Thank you. Andrea, with the proposed changes where buyers may potentially be responsible for their agent fees, how might this impact the overall cost of buying a home and the negotiation dynamics between buyers and sellers?
So, in regard to the negotiation side, I'm actually really excited for this change. One of the biggest things that I'm excited about is currently we have the exclusive buyer contract as a best practice, not a requirement. So with it becoming a requirement, now you at least know, on the listing side, working with a buyer's agent, that buyer is well informed. You at least know they had an opportunity to look at what's happening, what's available. In my opinion, I think as we start using that contract, we're going to start seeing right now, it's pretty typical for a seller to interview multiple agents for selling their home, right? Whereas when a buyer is looking, it's pretty normal for them to, well, if I don't use my mom's friend, my mom's going to be mad at me. This is why I have to use this person as my realtor. So I feel like that's going to start to shift out, which is going to force realtors that are going to continue to be successful to be more skilled, work on their skills, educate the buyer, educate the seller as to what's happening. So all in all, I think it's really just going to force everyone to step up their game.
Right, and I have to agree with you. So a lot of times we go on a listing presentation, we have our whole suite of things we offer, right?
Right.
We have our goodies. When we talk, we pitch ourselves.
Yep.
As a buyer's agent, how many people do a buyer's consultation and really sell yourself as a buyer's agent? With this settlement, we're going to have that conversation before we even show a house. So it's very important now that, okay, you have your grandma's friend who can show you a house. You can't go run to that house for post-settlement, guys. But you're not going to be able to, if it goes through, you're not going to be able to just run to that house and meet them at the house and say, okay, I'm Zach, nice to meet you, let's buy this house together. What's supposed to happen is you're supposed to bring them into your office, your coffee shop, wherever, sit them down, have a buyer's presentation, and the buyer is supposed to have clear knowledge of what you're going to be compensated.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's where it comes huge.
And realistically, if we acknowledge as realtors, we know on the buyer's end that's lacking quite a bit right now because buyers, especially in this market right now, buyers are so like, go, 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 here's my pre-approval, here's the houses that I want to see, and everybody is rushing through things. So, just like Dave said, there have been so many things over at least the last 17, 18 years that I've been in the industry that we've seen that I don't think this is going to be a bad thing. I really, really think it's probably going to be good.
And I think to Andrea's point, it's going to increase the level of knowledge, but with a lot of buyers understanding the differences, just like Andrea mentioned, between a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. Whereas years ago we were all seller's agents by law. Now there's buyer's agents and seller's agents, but a lot of buyers are not as caught up as far as the differences between a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. Not just you showing a buyer a house, actually representing them. So it's a great
It's
point.
giving us an opportunity as buyer's
to educate
agents to provide value instead of just the door opener.
Right.
Right. All right, Mike. Considering the potential scenario where buyers may need to negotiate their agent fees, what strategies can real estate agents employ to effectively communicate the value of their services and negotiate fair compensation?
That's nothing new. I think we just need to sharpen our tools more than anything. I think it was in 99 or 2000 I went to my first Blink Ferry event, and Dave was there. It was in D.C., Washington, D.C., I think.
Yeah.
And, there was a what?
I just said 99.
Yeah, right. So, thank you. So they were doing, it was my first event, and you were already involved in my frame. They're doing all these scripts, and Dave's telling us about role playing in the morning, and talking to agents from all over the country, and I'm like, this guy, are you serious?
Dave's gotten weird.
Yeah, like Dave, the Dearborn guys are looking role play. But anyways, and then got into it, right? Like, it's like anything else. And if you don't know your objection handlers, if you don't know your scripts, right? This may affect you, right? We talk about things will go on and what they do, but I think now more than ever, I talked to some of the young agents in our office who got into the business 5, 6, 7 years ago. God bless them, they're all doing well. But I also say that in the last 5, 6, 7 years, my mom and Dave's mom just sold real estate, really. And I'm not trying to downplay it, but it wasn't as challenging. But we have challenges now, right? Along with in our lawsuit, you have the housing storage inventory. So I think you should be sharpening your tools anyways. But yeah, to answer the question, scripts, objection handlers, and I also feel that you as that buyer's agent, that's your opportunity. A lot of us will, sell that house and, we neglect people post-closing. It is what it is. They're in their house, you get paid and you kind of move on. Well, I think now more than ever, you're going to need to really prove and show yourself to that buyer so you can continue to get those referrals. The last thing we want is a buyer to say, I didn't need them. I could have did that on my own. That wasn't that hard, right? So, be mindful of that, I would say.
So we were talking about coaching before this started, and one of the coaches I pay attention to is Jared James. He talks a lot about past client is a dirty word. That's not a thing anymore. It's your active client or your client. It's either they're actively buying and selling, or they're going to be referring you. But they're always your client, and I feel like as real estate agents kind of gone over the years, they've gotten very transactional of like, what can you do for me today? Oh, you're not buying selling? See you later. And I think that's a mindset shift that we're all going to have to make. It's if this is your client, you can't just count on them because you sold them a house 10 years ago.
Right.
To always stick with it.
Successful businesses aren't looking for new business only. You're looking for that business within your business. And usually it's a lot easier, right?
David, how might the changes in commission structure impact the competitiveness of smaller brokerages compared to larger firms, particularly in terms of attracting clients and offering competitive services?
Well, I think the smaller firms also serve a particular purpose in our real estate community. So, do I think it's going to drastically affect them? I don't think so personally, because I think like I said, they serve a specific purpose. In other words, you're going to get a little bit more of a gourmet, customized service because they don't work with as many buyers and as many sellers. So I don't think it'll affect them that way. I think it's going to have a more drastic effect on the realtors as a whole. So right now, you have to become much more skilled as a real estate agent, where you're not just showing a house and just showing, a customer a home, saying, "Well, here's the kitchen," and the customer's going to go, "Wow, I'm glad I brought a real estate licensed agent with me because I didn't know that was a kitchen.
Yeah.
I thought that was the bathroom," And so now us as agents have to raise our skill level to be able to work on behalf of that buyer. And I'm going to explain to you what I mean. Because now more than ever, you need a skilled agent to be able to, that knows their scripts and knows how to handle objections, to be able to work with that buyer and use that same skill set to maybe convince the seller to pay the commission to that buyer's agent, in this case myself, versus the buyer paying it. So now that buyer can't just go with any agent. They got to go with the skilled agent that's going to be able to negotiate potentially their commission to be brought back from the seller like the traditional way. Or you're going to need a skilled agent to be able to convince that seller through different scripts and dialogue to pay the concessions on behalf of the purchaser. Because right now, a lot of home sellers are thinking, well, this is great. I can put my home on the market. I don't have to pay a commission to the agent that brings me the buyer. And I don't have to pay the concessions, which would be the closing costs on behalf of the buyer, because that should be something the buyer should pay. And for that matter, why don't I pay my listing agent a lot less? Well, that sounds like a beautiful story. It's perfect utopia. But it's not a realistic story, because the reality is, like I mentioned, the average real estate agent at one point made something like $20,000 or $18,000 a year. And a lot of home sellers and buyers think agents make multi-million dollars a year. They don't, because there's a lot of agents making less than $20,000, since there's a lot of part-time agents. I can tell you this, part-time agents are going to be challenged.
Right.
That one, there's no doubt about it. You need a skilled agent that's been doing it for a while to be able to get things done. Part-time agents, yeah, they'll be challenged. But the smaller boutique real estate companies, I think they still serve a purpose in our community.
Well, touching on what you just said, there's a statistic, holy moly, that I read earlier, that only 50% of agents, or 49% of agents sold 0 or 1 property.
I was just going to tell you one, yeah.
And so, for the average consumer, maybe you're watching at home, you think that every real estate agent's driving around in a fancy car and they're rich. But the reality is, people get their license and they do nothing with it, and they wait for their neighbor to come knock on the door and ask them to sell their house.
Right.
But bringing it back to the question, do you think there's a purpose for larger brokerages, like say C21? Let's say, you have a big office, you're all working with each other, and again, this is a controversial topic here, but you're sharing listing information before it hits the market, and you want to work with each other in your own office. What's your take on that?
I mean, yes,
Would that be beneficial
there will
for
be an advantage there as far as the agents in the bigger offices. But like I mentioned, even the smaller offices do serve a purpose. Where arguably you're not a number. At that real estate office, they know which buyers they're working with and which sellers they're working with. So you're going to get possibly a little bit more attention, but just not as much exposure.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Andrea. In light of proposed settlement, what measures can real estate professionals take to ensure transparency and education to clients about the evolving commission structure and its implications for its transactions?
Again, I feel like that's where going into your skill set works, and again, providing value. And when we talk about value with realtors, I understand, like, according to our license, that we're salespeople, but we're really not. We're providing a service. If we were salespeople, we would have been out of the business the first time something happened, let's say 20, 30 years ago. The reason I think that realtors are still in the business, like I think that we've talked about before, travel agents, right? They went out of the business because there wasn't very much value that was there. We've had, in the real estate industry, of course, other companies who have come to try to replace what realtors are doing, and it simply doesn't work.
Zillow, for example.
Yeah, but again, when we talk about value, a lot of times you say, you're limited on value. But if you look at, let's say, name brand material things that you buy, you're going to buy a name brand over something else because you see the value. Same thing goes for realtors. So it all comes down to your skill set, the value that you offer, and how you are educating your clients. One of the beautiful things about real estate, I think, is that it's not a black and white industry. It's a very, we could talk for 8 hours on different ways to lead generate. And then when we talk about scripts, the way that I present a script and the way Dave presents the script and the way that Mike does will come off very different each time, even though it's the exact same word. So I really think that realtors just doubling down on staying educated, staying ahead of the market, listening to their brokers, staying on top of anything that's happening to continue to educate their clients is how to stay ahead.
Thank you. Mike, what role do you see real estate associations and MLS platforms playing in facilitating the transition to new commission structure and providing support and resources to their members during this process?
Oh gosh, words that come to mind would be leadership, support, guidance. I'm one that would pay my board dues and never look. I'm being real, and I'm sure I speak for others in this room. And here's my check, thank you. I think now more than ever we need them. We need to lean on them. When this lawsuit was first settled, I think everybody and their mother was saying, NAR, 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 and every cuss word you can think of. And then, as you sit back and think about it, and you say, okay, wait a minute. Remax settled before this, KW settled, I don't know if EXP did. And now NAR is, they're a little bit smarter than us. Their attorneys in the courts are. And you say to yourself, okay, maybe this is the right thing to do. Okay, so let's follow their lead from here. So, I got the two Lilas in here who are, doing a heck of a job with, Dave Moore. They've been providing this info, right? Well, who they need to listen to the NARs and the MARs of the world, and offices, right? The C21s and Remax Andrew's office. Yeah, you're going to get your forms and all the legal stuff, but that's going to come from the higher channels. So we need to lean on them for the support, the guidance, and make sure that we're doing it the right way. Right. So I think more than ever, we need the NARs and the MARs of the world. We do. It's easy to say, NAR, you guys screwed up. How did you settle? I don't know if who's ever been involved in lawsuits. We got a heck of an attorney here will tell you. Sometimes settling makes sense. I'm not going to get into that part of it because I don't know enough. But with that said, we need their support and guidance for sure.
Okay. Thank you, David. What misconceptions or misunderstandings do you anticipate to arise among buyers, sellers, and real estate professionals regarding the settlement, and how can these be addressed through communication and education?
Well, so, we're talking about a lot of this stuff, but we all got to keep in mind is this is still early on, and we're still waiting until July until the courts actually decide if this is official or not. But nevertheless, the biggest misconception that's out there right now is home sellers don't have to pay a commission to sell their property, and that's just not a reality. Another misconception is that the prices are going to drastically drop. That one's definitely not a reality. Because the reality of the real estate market is this: there's always going to be people getting married, people, passing on, people upsizing or downsizing, people moving from state to state. Here we're in an office building, and as a lot of you guys remember, years ago, this was full to the max because there was always relocation happening. And there's still a lot of relocation happening. So there's a lot of people that relocate from state to state that have to buy houses. So I don't think it's going to drastically affect the market in that sense. What it will affect mostly is the real estate agent market, where that real estate agent has to have their skill set's got to go up probably another 2-3 notches in order to be able to do a better job for their buyers. Because in the past, or most recently I should say, and this is a pet peeve of mine, when a buyer's agent right now, you see this a lot, it's a huge pet peeve of mine, because a buyer's agent right now will show a property, the buyer will decide to make an offer, and then I'm sitting on my computer and I see an email, offer from so-and-so, here's the terms. And that's a huge pet peeve of mine. Now, part of it is I'm old school.
Right.
So to me, I'm into, you as a buyer are asking the agent to represent you. That agent should contact the realtor, listing agent ahead of time, sell themselves first, that they are a competent professional agent, and then sell me on the offer. Now, I did real estate way back when, where we presented offers at the houses. The two agents would be there, the buyer would be there, the seller would be there, and we'd go, and then we don't come to an agreement, and they'd ask one of the agents to step out. Usually the buyer's agent would have to step out a little bit. They talk amongst each other, and we go back in, we negotiate some more. You had very serious negotiations on behalf of the buyers. Now, the only negotiations is the agent's pressing enter. And to me, that's not full representation. That's going to shift it back to the old school style, where now the agent's going to have to negotiate not only the price, but they're going to have to negotiate the commissions that they're going to be paid, whether it's coming from the seller or from the buyer. Either way, their skill set's got to be up higher.
This is not on the script, but I'm curious, these flat fee agents, what's your opinion on that?
So, they're good people trying to make a living. Okay? Yeah, it's not as effective. Because you notice some of these companies, for example, Redfin came into the business. Some of us don't even know how to spell Redfin anymore. They're gone. You got Zillow that came into the real estate market. Now, Zillow's still an effective exposure on all your properties to home sellers and to buyers. But they shifted, as a lot of you guys know, they shifted into, well, we could sell the house for you. You can pay us a commission. We'll find a house for you. Basically trying to go into the real estate agent market. And that failed also. As a matter of fact, if you notice their stocks, they're on the drop right now. And the reason it failed is because there's way too many variables involved in the home buying and selling process. That's A. Number two, there's way too much emotions involved. This is the most emotional purchase or sale that you will make in your lifetime. It is not something that can be done on a computer. We as realtors, a lot of times people don't recognize some of the value that we bring to the table. We end up being psychologists, handyman or woman. Now, in my case, I can't be a handyman because I can't even put a light bulb in. But for most realtors, they become handymen. Right. They're dealing with City Hall as far as ordering city inspections. They're trying to clear title for you. They're dealing with a mortgage agent. Trying to see what's going on with the mortgage, and if there's a challenge, they're dealing with the mortgage agent on that. They're dealing with the listing agent. We're marriage counselors. Thank you very much. Yes. We're estate planners. And then sometimes we're having to solve problems between brothers and sisters are arguing with the estate. Emotions where buyers don't want to buy the home anymore, they want to back out. Now we become lawyers, trying to help them with the legalese. Right. So there's a lot of variables that are involved that we bring to the table, and that's something that I think a lot of home buyers themselves don't recognize, because we do a lot of the work on the back end, and it's awkward to sit and tell a seller every single thing you do, because then they think, look, that's what I hired you for, is to get that job done. Right. So we don't tell them. Exactly. But then they think, oh, well, this is easy. Right.
Yes, and so I go on Downriver and Friends. Everybody's familiar with that page. Anyone know a real estate agent? You're one?
Yeah.
How many agents are blasted out there? And they're blasted out there because they did a good job for their client. Yeah. And so the attack on real estate agent, the buyer's agent's commission, is something that I take personally, because I just had a closing, and it was a nightmare at the end of the story. And other agent ran away, and the seller is supposed to get the final water bill ordered. Didn't do
You
anything.
end up taking over everything.
I do it all, and I had already got paid on that transaction. It's over, but I'm still helping him go through the process because again, it's goes back to that Jared James. He's a client for life to me. He's not just some guy I sold a house to one time, right? I think that I know you didn't ask me, but my opinion is the biggest change is you guys have to go back to helping and wanting to do the right thing. The people that get into the industry and want to just make $1 million because they saw Selling Sunset or some Netflix show, those people just don't have a shot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Well, I want to add something else that a lot of home buyers and sellers don't recognize is that we don't get paid on every transaction. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of failed transactions where I work with a buyer or a seller for half a year or a year sometime. Mm-hmm. Whether you're showing them houses or you have their property on the market, you're negotiating back and forth, and you get right before closing and somebody either backs out or some title issue or whatever, or the buyer ends up getting transferred to another state or whatever. So there's a lot of transactions that are done. We did everything on our end of the job, but we don't get paid for it.
Right.
Whereas in for example, retail industry, you come in and you buy a jacket, you pay for that jacket. Mm-hmm. You walk out, you don't like that jacket when you get home, that's your problem.
Right.
You still paid for that jacket. Yeah. But there's a lot of times where we show houses or put houses on the market where we're not paid, for those transactions. And a lot of home sellers and buyers don't see that part of it. The percentage of deals that fail is anywhere between 8 to 12%. And the percentage of buyers that don't end up buying is probably, I'd guesstimate, closer to 30, 40%. Or jump around to a different agent after you've shown them, 68 houses. Or they give you the great news, we found this great home that we're renting,
Yes.
after, 87 houses shown.
Yes. All right, Andrea, looking ahead, how might these changes reshape the landscape of the real estate market in terms of consumer behavior, industry practices, and overall buying and selling experience?
Well, really, it's just that. I think, I know we touched on a little bit earlier that real estate has gotten very transactional. So I feel like this is going to take us back to understanding this is an experience for our clients. They're not buying and selling homes every day. I feel like buyers are going to, again, but take a step back when it comes to choosing the realtor that they're working with, making sure that they're working with somebody skilled. And as a whole, I think it's really just going to add a whole new level of professionalism to our industry.
Right. And to take it one step further, that goes to what you offer as a buyer's agent.
Right.
That's the hot topic right now. So when you sit down with these buyers, it's okay, are you shopping on what's on the MLS? Because everyone can see that. Everyone can go to Zillow and type in 123 Main Street, yeah, I want to see this house, and then call you to see it. But what are you doing to set yourself apart from those agents? Like, part of my buyer's consultation is I sit them down and I say, this is the house that we're looking for. If it's not on the market, I actively send postcards, we'll go door knocking, do whatever it takes, because I know exactly what my buyers want. I know that they can afford this house, and maybe this seller has been sitting on the sidelines and they listen to the news and they think that, oh, the real estate market's going down, I might as well sell now. Yeah. And so I've gotten a couple listings, and my buyers are beyond happy with me because you go and you do the extra mile and you do the extra thing, right?
I know that there's also been the misconception that buyers are just going to go directly to the listing agent every time, and if we just call it as it is, the buyers who are going to do that are already doing that now.
Right.
I don't think there's going to be an increase in anything that we see there, and again, that goes into a buyer's agent's role to continue to educate any clients or potential clients that yes, you can work with the listing agent, however, they're not working for you.
Right. And that brings it back to agency. And so a lot of people will use open houses to market their property. Like, we all know, agency 101, just because someone comes into your open house, that does not make you their buyer's agent. You are their sub-agent. Right. So if that buyer's under the impression that they have all the agency benefits and all the fiduciary duty that you're giving to them, they're being misrepresented. And so I've hosted a lot of open houses, and people come in and say, well, I'm cash. So what can you do? And I know you get double if if you're the buyer's agent. So what are you going to do for me? And I'm negotiating for my seller. First of all, I'll take it in and I'll tell them and like, look, this is what I got for you. And then as a listing agent, you have to really sell what you think is actually going to close, because everybody knows you have an open house, and then every neighbor on the street has a guy that wants to buy this house, right? But what are the chances of those people actually buying that house?
I tell you for myself, my plan is, at least at the initial stages, is to stay with the traditional model. And I'm going to go on record as saying I disagree with NAR's settlement. I think NAR's settlement gives the impression that realtors were doing something wrong, or we're doing something illegal, or we're doing something that was just self-centered or just for your own profit. And that's not the case. I really honestly and truly still believe that using the traditional model is the best way for that home seller to be able to get the maximum dollars in their pocket.
Yeah.
And the shift is going to be away from what they're actually paying, because they're going to think in terms of, I only want to pay 3%, therefore I'll make more profit. That's absolutely false, because what's going to happen by only paying, let's say 3, 2, or whatever it is, percentage just to the listing broker, but nothing to the buyer's agent, you're going to have a lot of agents that are not going to have the skill set to be able to convince their buyers to pay that commission. And thus what's going to happen on that particular property is going to get a lot less showings, and a lot less showings will invariably lead to a lesser price. So a home seller is going to have to determine, do I pay a more traditional commission and yet net more to my pocket, or do I put it on the market with this new model that all these, or I shouldn't say all, but a lot of agents are still not equipped to be able to work with the buyer and try to convince them to pay that commission, and thus you're going to get way less showings, and simple supply and demand. You're going to get a lesser price, and thus you're saving hypothetically 2-3%,
Right.
but you're losing 4, 5, 6% on the
What
sale.
goes into essentially it's the same as for sale by owner.
Exactly.
I think the issue, though, I don't know if it's, maybe it is or isn't the NAR settlement. I think it's the sensational journalism. And what
That's
they did and
a
how
big
they
part
did
of
with
it,
it. I mean, even like you said earlier, the president of the U.S. said, 6% or whatever. I was watching a Ramadan show, and I don't know why he commented on it, but one of the religious guys commented and said, realtors can't charge 6% in the month. You're involved in your sermon, but I think that's problem. And something else I want to piggyback. My concern, right, is I know how you're going to operate, right, and I know what to expect from you, and all you out here. I know what to get from mail. I don't want to pick on newbies. I don't want to come across that way, but I'm going to say I think our challenge in every market is going to follow their own lead of what that specific market does, right? We have our own market here in Dearborn Heights. It's what is everyone else going to do, and how is that going to affect us? I think post-July, I think July to the end of the year, those first few months, I think it's going to be really critical, and where we're going to be in a year or two, right? And I think it's in our hands, and there's certain things you kind of can't say, so I'll kind of stop there, but I think that's going to be really important, really critical, kind of what you're saying, and I worry a little bit.
Yeah, but there's a big chance too, it may come back to the traditional model. Because I'm going to tell you right now, in my personal view, with my real estate, 35 years of real estate knowledge, I don't think this is a workable model, personally. I don't believe, in my personal opinion, this is a good workable business model for home sellers. I really think home sellers are not going to be able to get the same pricing if they're putting their property out there and the agents are not able to negotiate with their buyers, paying their commission. Because for buyers, they've never paid a commission, not directly at least, for 200 years.
Right.
And now here's an agent that says, hey, by the way, why don't you pay me my $5,000 or $2,000 or $1,000?
Well, but then
That's
it
hard
also
to-
goes into, let's say a buyer does agree, then it goes into like the VA buyer, they can't.
They can't, exactly.
So then what do they do? Like,
And-
does it?
Can you explain that for?
It's almost
everybody?
military discrimination.
Right, that's what I said. So it's like coming over one, which I agree with Dave. I don't necessarily agree with how NAR is being portrayed, and I don't think any of us in this room think that anything happened was wrong, like a wrongdoing on the realtor part, I guess, is what I meant. But as far as the VA, it would be a discrimination against veteran buyers, because right now, if a veteran is purchasing a home using his VA benefits, his or her VA benefits, they have 0% down, the opportunity for 0% down, and according to the VA, cannot pay anything toward closing costs. So that includes brokerage fees, compliance fees, commissions, anything is included in that. So if we're now saying the buyer is expected to pay a commission, the veteran could be ready, willing, and able to pay their realtor a commission. However, now they have to decide, do I want to use my earned veteran benefits or do I want to use a realtor?
Right.
And I don't think that's
But
fair.
the key change in that commissions thing, the only key change is we, as realtors, can no longer on the multiple listing service, on the MLS, put out what that commission is.
Right.
It hasn't changed. The seller can still do the traditional whatever commission that they've got.
So how are we going to relay and convey this?
But that's it. But it's
That's all.
back to what we said. It's similar to the commercial market.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the exact market.
Well, I think, commercial, you're going to have to call the brokerage, right?
But that's what it's
Right,
doing.
but it may not even have to, right? And that's a whole separate conversation. ALE, EXP, USC21, and MIA, REMAX, and NBR can have your office website where you're going to have your listings, correct? They can be offered in there, but that's for the brokers to figure out.
Yeah.
So I don't even, what I'm saying, I think it's going to actually be easier than with the commercial, negotiating with commercial agents. I think it'll be a little bit easier because I think it still can be spelled out, just not on the MLS. Whereas the commercial brokers never spell it out. You
Right.
got to call and fight them. And when they know you're
Or like
a residential agent, they don't want to pay you at all. They
They're
don't
going
want
to call you back.
they don't want to be part of the
Or
deal.
like Dave said, just be strategic with your caps lock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In your description.
So I think it'll be a little easier to convey what that commission is.
I'm changing my middle name to 3%. Dave 3% dollar. It's legal.
All right, Mike. Some have reported receiving real estate class action lawsuit and settlement notices in the mail. Are they legitimate, or should there be a cause for concern?
That's probably more for the attorneys, but from the research I've done is, if your brokerage in 2022 did less than $2 billion in your NAR brokerage, you're covered in that lawsuit and any other lawsuits. If your brokerage did over $2 billion, which Compass and maybe Berkshire might be the only ones, don't quote me,
Real estate one.
real estate one,
Yeah,
then
same.
it doesn't apply to them, so that whoever gets that postcard can still go file, become part of that class action lawsuit and get you $10. But there is language though, there is language, NAR did, there is language to where if they want to come back and negotiate with the plaintiff, real estate one and Compass them,
Yes.
they still have that opportunity.
Can you touch on that $10 statement?
The numbers I've been seeing that the consumer's going to get about $10, and I think the attorneys have filed for over $80 million in fees. I mean, right?
Yeah, and that's crucial for the
That's why
consumer
Rich, you guys got the
to
big
hear
money.
that. That's how it works.
It is, right? The attorneys make the money.
For sure, yeah. Well, that concludes our questions. We have some time for some questions and answers from the audience. Anyone got some questions?
I have a question. Mike, you touched a lot about the newbies. But what do we tell new agents that? Oh,
Out.
yeah. So my question was in regards to the newbies, right? Maybe even the ones that want to, because recently last week I had a guy I know say, "Hey, he's so unaware of what's happening." He's like, "Hey, I'm finally going to take this class online." I was like, "Wow, okay. There's a little bit of changes going on. We have to talk about it." So, what do we tell new agents coming in? And do we focus on what Dave says, skill, or?
I'm going to give you a 1-minute story. There's a client that you'll know where I'm going. There's a client who I was working with who was working with an agent prior to me, and I was going over I was going over blood-based pain disclosure, and he says, we're talking, was your house built before or after 1978? He's like, oh, it's not. Was I born before 1978? I'm like, what are you talking about? That falls on the brokerage and management, right? You need to train these agents. I personally think it's pretty easy to get a real estate license, right? Anybody can get on a computer for 40 hours, but this is where you got to sharpen those skills. And I think that falls on the brokerage and how committed you are as an agent, right? How bad do you want it? Is it a marathon or is it a sprint? That's for you to decide individually, and for good brokers to identify. Okay, this one's going to be all right. Maybe I'm not going to invest too much time in this one, but that falls on the brokers.
I'd like to add to that. The reason I feel a lot of agents need to raise their skill set level across the board. I did 20 years with the Mike Ferry system, and I paid a lot of money in that program for 20 years to learn the skill set of being able to negotiate and what have you. Buyers and sellers come over to us to use our specific, most important skill, which is negotiations. And if we don't know how to negotiate, we don't have the skill set to be able to negotiate, we're not going to be able to get the best deal, whether it's our buyer or our seller. Because one of the things that we say as realtors, for example, we say, well, I sell houses. No, you don't. I always correct people. We don't sell houses. Because that house belongs to that seller, and that buyer is buying that house. I have nothing, this is not my house that I'm selling. I'm just the go-between. So if you're going to be the go-between and get paid, your skill set that you bring to the table to that buyer or to that seller better be at an A-plus level. Not just saying, as I mentioned earlier, in half joke, but half serious, and here's the kitchen. Like when I show houses, I don't say here's the kitchen. Because to me, I think most people, including my 3-year-old granddaughter, can figure out that's a kitchen. So that's why I think skill set comes into effect.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So, in a
Microphone
practical,
right
in a practical sense, are you going to see maybe in the market where if a buyer is going to pay or agrees to pay a commission to their agent, are they going to seek a reduction in the home price because they're paying a commission? Because already the home is its actual cost, right? But now they're paying an additional cost to their agent. Are they going to seek a lower cost? Do you think that's going to be something that's going to play out in the market?
I think it's going to depend on how strong that buyer's agent is.
Yeah.
Really?
In my opinion, I think that's one of the dust settling things that we're going to see.
I don't personally foresee it changing too much, primarily because you got to think about it this way: the buyer's paying that commission either way. You know, if a seller's selling a $100,000 home and they're paying a 6% commission, okay, so they're netting 94. Well, now if the buyer's paying that commission, well, now they're going to probably get that property for 97. But then you take a look at it percentage-wise, the buyer's side, whether it's 2 or 3%, most of the time. But it could be $1, it could be $1 because it's negotiable. We all know that.
Yeah, me too.
But let's take a 3% price point, and you use that across a $200,000, $300,000 home, which is most of our average in this area. So now you're looking at $5,000, $6,000, maybe $7,000. It's not a drastic enough amount to drastically change the price points, because there will always be that supply and there will always be that demand. I don't personally foresee it changing. Nothing to speak about, let's put it this way.
And to his point, the market around here, the average price point is an entry level price point.
Right.
Yeah.
So the struggle is a lot of my buyers recently have used first time home buyer programs. They are struggling to come up with
The 3%.
with 1% of the loan. And now you're going to say, okay, you come up with 1% of your loan and also 3% to me. These buyers are going to be stuck.
There's closing costs.
You know, so how are we going to get them back into the market?
Which goes back to my point with that exact scenario. Any realtor, I'm telling you, my personal viewpoint, as I speak today, I'm going to stick with the traditional route. I'm going to talk to my sellers advantages to them using the traditional route. Because if I have a property on the market and I'm using a X commission, okay, the traditional commission, you as a buyer's agent are going to bring your buyers to this property. Because you know that that buyer cannot pay the commission to you on that property, and they know they can't pay you the commission on that property. Therefore, that property has been canceled out.
Right.
And you're going to have more agents gravitating like bees, you know, coming over to my property to sell that one, which is going to increase the price for all.
Traffic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Traffic. You got to convince the seller, right? More traffic, more offers.
Right.
Again, I think it's going to, a lot of it's going to fall on the agent, whether it be the buyer or the seller side.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, well, you know, on the buyer side, the 3%, I can offer this or that. Unfortunately, you're going to have some that might say, yeah, I'll do it for % or whatever you
I mean,
have.
my prediction also is, specifically in this area, I do think it's just going to default into that traditional,
Play itself out.
I think so.
I agree.
yeah.
And just one wrench in the plan here. There's a lot of people who say, "I'll go to hourly." That really bothers me
Yeah.
because that doesn't incentivize the agent to close the deal. That incentivizes the agent to show a million houses.
Well, I've read some,
Yeah.
Zach, where they'll do, okay, I'll hourly or a flat fee, or I'll go look at houses and I'll pay you X amount just to write up the offer and negotiate. I mean, this is a fluid situation.
Right.
There's, like you said, the dust has to settle.
Yeah.
I think we're all going to be learning a lot over the next few months.
I agree.
I don't know if I missed this. Sorry, I thought I was on Zoom, so that's why I walked in late. But like this NAR thing, this whole thing, how come in Michigan, like none of us heard about this or knew about this, or like why was this like even a conversation that happened that nobody like
It
even
was. It was. That's how we neglected it. Because I'm on some real estate boards, you know, groups on Facebook, this and that, and people bring it up, and you'd be like, yeah, that's,
DOJ.
I don't know, you can, and they could probably answer, but I think we neglected it, we did.
But
Because
the
I remember
sellers
hearing,
actually doing this, like where sellers actually, hey, we want to go after these buyers agents.
Department of Justice was,
Huh?
yeah, DOJ got involved.
DOJ got.
Yeah.
But there was one case that kind of got blown out of
Minnesota?
proportion. Yeah, it was with a local judge, and the attorney who took the case was buddies with the judge. And so NAR thought they had this under control until it got to that point, and it kind of blew out of proportion. So the judge kind of let anything go through his courtroom. They had a very small town jury that, they kind of all knew each other there. So
The attorney brought his family in the court.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
it's
I've just never,
Can of worms
It was a-
opened up.
I've just
Yeah,
never
it was
heard
a
of
little
any
crazy.
seller, I've not heard one seller, one buyer ever say anything about we shouldn't be paying a commission to the buyer's agent, or we should. It was always 5%, 6%, or 7% conversation. That was it, Even when Dave, back in the foreclosure market, Dave was, offering 4% to the buyer's agent instead of 3%, and people were swarming to our
I just
listings.
told them.
So guess what? To get 3, we're going to start charging 4.
When I did it, so when the market had a drastic crash, and for a lot of realtors selling some of these properties that were bank foreclosures, quite frankly, realtors were not making a living. So a lot of them started getting out of the real estate business because the bank foreclosures were $20,000 and $30,000 and $40,000 properties, and the banks would pay, as an example, $1,000 to the selling broker. Well, that's not enough to be able to be competitive enough for a realtor to make a living.
Yeah, Mike.
So then what happened, I switched it, I said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna do a game changer. I'm gonna pay an extra 1% based on what I used to charge personally, not the board, personally. I was paying out 3%, I said, I'm gonna make it 4% to the selling broker. And you had a lot of realtors gravitating towards our listings, and they would sell, but most importantly, for that home seller that quote unquote paid an extra 1%, they consistently got 2, 3, 4, or even 5% more for their home than had it been at the more traditional price that I charge.
And it was a tougher market.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a lot
Absolutely.
harder market.
I had the chance to do the 4% on one of your listings.
Yeah.
So your middle name would be negotiable 3%.
Yeah, negotiable.
Dave, negotiable 3%.
Negotiating up,
3+.
3+.
So just quick question, since it started with the Department of Justice, do you feel like any lobbying efforts went into just making or raising concerns around eliminating one side of the transaction with the buyer's agent? Could Zillow potentially be incentivized to have lobbied Congress, for instance, for them to serve as a buyer's agent? Have you looked into any type of articles as to how this started? Why the DOJ took this up, why it became a hot topic from a congressional standpoint. Because typically they listen to their constituents, and there must have been some type of lobbying, whether it's grassroots or organized lobbying. So that would be something to look into.
I mean, if it did, it was probably on the back end. I can tell you.
I know the DOJ wasn't as involved.
It went down 17% the day that happened.
Yeah, I know that the DOJ is involved in overseeing the settlement, because there are some questions right now of, before the judge signs this, is the DOJ okay with it? And from what I've been reading, they are, and that was signed. As far as what you're asking, that's a great question. I don't know.
From what we
I don't think
understand,
Zillow would have been.
Because
Be
they're
like that,
negatively
because-
impacted.
Yeah, they're going to be negatively impacted.
from what we understand, is because they didn't want a chain reaction between different boards suing NAR, and it would cost them way more money because of I believe there was one thing that was catching everything, and it would have caused a much larger chain reaction across the country, and it would have just cost billions and billions, and it would have just been a bigger mess than for them to settle.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting is they came out with this in order to be able to quote unquote protect the buyers. But I think they put the buyers in the worst position now, because a buyer before basically kind of felt like, yeah, this is for free. I'll have her show us houses, and then I'll buy the home, and that home seller will pay her. We're good. Now they flipped it to where they said, okay, now buyer, you better negotiate with your agent. How are you going to pay them, and where are you going to get that money to be able to pay them? I personally think this created much more of a problem than it was in the past. Let me tell you something. If you guys feel that home sellers and buyers had a problem with the system, then there wouldn't have been a closing. Because every closing, for every 100 closings, maybe one or two, one party or another is totally dissatisfied or upset or call it whatever you want to call it. But 98 out of 100, a buyer is comfortable with the purchase and they're comfortable with how everybody was paid and they are not paying, they're comfortable with the price, because if they're not comfortable with the price, we're not closing. And they're closing and the seller's comfortable and they're comfortable paying the commission to the selling listing and selling broker, and they're comfortable with what they netted out, otherwise they're not closing. Now you may say, what do you mean, they're going to back out? No, they wouldn't have accepted the offer in the first place. So I think this is trying to rock a system that was working forever and ever. Again, I'll go publicly and say I'm in total disagreement with what NAR.
But it's
It's
also,
gonna immediately, in the immediate 6 months, next year, as long as we have this housing shortage, which I don't think is gonna be remedied in a year or two. I do think it's gonna screw the buyers in the fact that property goes up. We all have multiple buyers. You have 2 or 3 that wanna see that property. Where are you gonna show it to? The one that's gonna pay you 3%, the one's gonna pay you 2%, the one that doesn't have the money to pay you, right?
Right.
So they're not gonna, they may get in the door, they may not get in the door. You know, now you have this, you know, maybe you have a tension relationship. It's gonna
This other legal mess
yeah.
that we're going to be put on a spot
It
for
is.
not showing the property, showing the property because of getting paid or not getting paid. So
Actually,
there's been other-
publicly gonna be bashed.
In addition to your point, Mike,
Yeah.
what you're referencing, this could also be arguably discrimination against
Yes.
people with limited income.
Yes, and fair
But you
housing.
can't show a house unless you have a buyer's agency contract signed now.
but then it's also,
That's
if I'm
the law now.
selling my $200,000 home and I'm buying, and I'm paying 3% only to my listing agent, but then I'm buying a $300,000 home and I'm paying 3% to my buyer's agent, that 3% that I'm saving, I'm still
You
paying
want that
6%,
payment,
but now I'm paying, what, 1,000 or 3,000 more because I'm buying a more expensive home.
Except in this new system, now you have that little grudge like, well,
Yeah.
pay this guy.
Right.
But Andrea, so the listing agent can't show a buyer the home, okay, because he has to have a buyer's agency with that buyer,
Correct.
okay? So he has to do that. A buyer's agency, I'm the buyer's agency. I have to have a buyer's agency with that buyer.
Right.
So I have to get paid too. So that's a catch-22 right there. So that eliminates that, right?
Yeah.
So who's gonna be buying it? A for sale by owner. Well, he could have did that anyways, if a for sale by owner, because he could have saved the 3% and he's paying the listing agent anyways.
Yeah.
So what really happened right there?
Right.
Nothing. That's what we do now.
Yep.
My take on
But they
this.
don't explain that on the news.
My take on this is Michigan has been a designated agency state, and not every state throughout the country is a designated agency state. So the complaint from a lot of these class action lawsuits are buyers or sellers that are like, wait, why am I paying the other agent? Because no one had that conversation with them. That's what the crux of the issue is. And again, Michigan has been a designated agency state. So while some agents didn't fill out your agency agreement, exclusive right to sell contract, you're supposed to. But most of us did that did it correctly. And so for us that did it correctly, this is a real head scratcher, because what do you mean you have an issue? All of our closings are, everybody's
Right.
happy, everybody's smiling. So go ahead.
I mean, and this is just a thought. I know that there's a transition between customer and client. So when I have an open house and people come in, they're potential customers, are not yet a client. I guess I'm just trying to work the thought around in my head how somebody is going to hire you as a buyer's agent and you haven't even shown them one home and they haven't even been out with you yet. So I mean, is there do you think that there will be some type of workaround where that person is still considered a customer, where you meet them at the home, you introduce yourself, you at least have a discussion about the house before you ask them to make a 3% or 4% commitment to you, I guess that's where my mind thought is going, is there going to be something of that nature? Because then at that point, any person who comes into the open house, what do you say to them? Like, how will that work?
Yeah.
And try to enforce that favorably if they don't work with another agent.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Try to enforce that buyer's agency if they go work with another agent.
Yeah.
Agent
What do
too.
you do?
You can't enforce it.
So to your comment, it really just brings back to this is helping the buyer. But in your situation, all the situations we just spoke about, the buyer is really getting the short end of the stick, especially in our market. Again, first-time home buyers have been my go-to. They get all these down payment assistance programs that they need to get into homes. These are good people that just are trying to get a home. There's nothing wrong with them needing down payment assistance. But for a seller to say no, no, I'm not paying any buyer's agent commission. So now you're asking us agents to work for free. And even if an agent does a great job with their scripts, and it's just like suing someone that has no money. You know, you can only get what you can get out of someone who has something, right?
I did just want to touch on what Layla was asking about, like, new agents coming into the market. I don't think there's ever been, like, a bad time for realtors to start. And I guess I say that because I started, like, during the recession. My own career, again, building up on a skill set. But I think the biggest thing that, in my opinion, agents who have been in the business, let's say 4 years or so or less, they've never experienced anything like industry shaking. So they've never experienced dust settling or anything like that. So I feel like that's where that like shock and panic is going to come in. But I wouldn't deter anyone from getting started. Maybe they'll be the best realtor ever.
I was going to comment about the verbiage that I think a lot of realtors were confusing when talking to their sellers. A lot of, me included, by the way, in the beginning, I made many mistakes in that I would say to a seller, the standard is this, or you cover the listing side and the buying side, whereas now we realize, or I have realized more than ever, is what you say to a seller is, your cooperation, your commission negotiation is through my brokerage, and then my brokerage is offering a cooperation with another brokerage in order to get you the best possible deal for your home. So we used to say to buyers, "Oh, don't worry, the seller's paying my commission." No, the listing brokerage is paying my brokerage's commission. So I think that language too, we have to really focus on changing and how we're speaking to sellers and buyers about that.
Again, that's why these next 6 months, 1 year, are so
Yeah.
critical. They really, really are. It could shape this industry for the next major shift or change.
Yeah.
But it'll always work out in the end.
Absolutely.
Always does, always will.
At the end of the day, if there's 10 houses and 8 or 5 are offering commission and 5 are not, we all know which house is going to get top dollar, make the most money, and sell the quickest is when they're offering a commission. So whoever doesn't offer a commission
Yeah.
is going to miss the ball on
Small
many things.
brokerages matter too. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions before we wrap up? No? All right, well, I want to take a moment to thank everybody for attending today. Thank you for coming out. It means a lot too. This was my first panel discussion. Hopefully you guys are going to tell. I had a lot of fun. So thank you guys for coming. Thank you to Middle East North Africa Chamber of Commerce for putting this together.
Hey, thank you.
And thank you to all the panelists. You guys were great today.
Thank you.
You did a good job too.
Thank you.
Great job.
Good job, Zach.
Thank you.